Well, the origin of the COVID pandemic is the topic of a House investigation today. A subcommittee examining new evidence that the virus escaped from a lab in China. There are also questions whether some U.S. health officials actively tried to discredit that theory. CBN's Hurd reports.
The Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Pandemic published emails Sunday in which Dr. Christian Andersen reportedly admits that Dr. Anthony Fauci, the former director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, prompted him to write a scientific paper on the origins of COVID-19, with the goal of disproving the theory the virus escaped from a laboratory in China and instead may have come from a so-called wet market where exotic animals are sold.
The fundamental question is, why was Dr. Fauci so consumed with making sure the narrative wasn't about the lab? I think it's because they were doing gain-of-function research there. He didn't want that out.
The Energy Department and the FBI now believe the lab leak theory to be true. The mainstream media claimed that the idea that COVID-19 originated in the Wuhan Institute of Virology had been debunked and was a conspiracy theory. Social media platforms labeled the lab leak theory misinformation and even censored it. Former CNN boss Jeff Zucker reportedly called the lab leak theory a Trump talking point and told reporters not to pursue it. The New York Times science reporter tweeted that the lab leak theory has racist roots. The Washington Post's Josh Rogan now admits the media suppressed the lab leak theory in part because of TDS, which stands for Trump Derangement Syndrome, opposing the lab leak theory simply because President Trump supported it. ABC's John Carl says the media now has egg on its face.
Look, some things may be true even if Donald Trump said them.
And we have the media and Democrats acting like defense attorneys for the Chinese instead of helping get to the bottom of what actually happened.
Republican Senator Ted Cruz has called for Dr. Anthony Fauci to face perjury charges for lying under oath to Congress about the origins of COVID-19. Ted Galen Carpenter writes that the media censorship of the lab leak theory has had serious fallout.
I think it should be an object lesson about the slippery slope of disinformation as a concept, how it can be used to stifle badly needed debates.
In a recent interview, Dr. Anthony Fauci said we may not ever know where the virus came from. Now more answers could be forthcoming after the Senate voted unanimously to declassify intelligence on COVID-19's origin. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
All right. Thank you, Dale. Gordon, back to you.
Well, there's a long list of disinformation campaigns, and you get behind that long list and you see politics in action. So, was there Russian collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russian government? Well, it's now been completely debunked. But the two-year nightmare that the nation went through in order to get to that place where it's been debunked. Then you have the New York Times saying that President Trump knew about a Russian bounty on U.S. soldiers in Afghanistan. Well, now that turns out to be completely bogus. There was no truth to it at all. Then the Wuhan lab. Now, you have a history here. The history is we funded that lab, which is just amazing. When most Americans hear that, they go, you've got to be kidding. But under the Obama administration, Fauci being involved, $3.5 million of U.S. taxpayers' money went into the Wuhan Institute of Virology to study SARS. And they went into bat caves to harvest these exotic viruses, and they brought them out into the sun and took them all the way to Wuhan. So when a virus that's related to a bat virus gets out into the open, everybody says, well, it's got to be the wet market problem. That's where SARS originated, so it's got to be that. And don't pay attention to this Wuhan Institute of Virology. At the same time, we're ignoring that there were lab leaks in similar labs in Beijing. We were ignoring a French report that the Wuhan Institute had lax standards. We ignored it all, and I think we did it for politics. that somehow if the virus was some weaponized thing, a gain of function by the Chinese military infiltrating, taking over that Wuhan lab in order to develop weapons, that somehow taxpayer money being involved, that would benefit President Trump in an election. And that's what we're dealing with. And it seems to be a coordinated effort among private companies that control media platforms, as well as political campaigns, as well as government employees. So will we ever get to the bottom of it? I don't know. Will Fauci actually face charges for perjury? I don't know. But we're into a place, can you trust anything? Can you trust what Congress is telling you? Can you trust what government employees who are supposed to tell us the truth and this is what's really happening? Can we trust media? And I think for all of us, we're saying, no, not anymore. I mean, you can fool me once, but when you do it the second, third, fourth, fifth time, it's shame on me if I still believe you.